Okay, as a reminder, there is a document associated with this. If you don't mind adding your name to the attendee list, I will share the document on the chat as well. Alrighty. Let's see. I put a couple things in the agenda. We could start running through those. Feel free to add more things to the agenda if you want something or you think there's something that we should discuss. The first thing is KubeCon updates. So I don't know, we'll probably hash this out in the working group meeting, but I wanted to see if anybody had any updates or cool stuff that they saw at KubeCon. I know, Jesse, you were there. Travis, did you hop in as well?
I'm hopping in today
Okay,
after this meeting, so yeah.
there you go.
Yeah, let's
Probably
see how it goes.
pretty quiet so far from the booth's perspective.
Yeah, the booth's been quiet. One of the things I saw was Slack, especially when Ben and Terrence gave their presentation. There were a lot of activity in the Slack associated to that. So that was pretty cool to see.
Yeah, it looked like the talk went well. They had a bunch of questions towards the end, so that looked good.
Except for the video quality. Apparently that was the thing, yeah. But it wasn't just their talk. Like I attended a couple talks and just the overall video quality was subpar. That made any demos like very hard to comprehend.
This was the case for the Cloud Foundry Summit recently as well. Any screens that went up were not happening.
Hopefully learnings for the next one. Cool. I did post something. I don't know exactly if it'll be related to platform or honestly, like I think there was a question I brought up in governance about what was it? The Buildpacks registry and the potential of another sub-team, which would be like the distribution sub-team that takes ownership of that. But there was a StarGS, which is basically tar gunzip with a seekable tar gunzip format, which was really cool. It's like lazy loading images. And I think that would be like from a performance aspect, I think that would be awesome to at least investigate to see whether or not that value would be there, especially for things where we only use a small bit of, you know, runtime dependencies for like the build process. We don't really care to download all the build packs in a builder. If we could just run, like download the detect script, right, or the detect binary, then we don't have to download everything else. Anyways, that was something that I'll probably investigate in the future, but I added to our Slack channel as well. Cool. Anything else on that one? You know what? I just recall we didn't really go through a status update and release planning. I could give mine on behalf of the VMware side for the pack release. We did have a pack release go out 0.13.0. Haven't seen any issues reported yet, so crossing our fingers. So that was just yesterday. We are updating a lot of documentation in regards to that new release and making sure that some of the callouts or changes are properly documented. That's it for us, or for me at least. Any other updates?
Salesforce side, I think Joe's pushing forward on the stack pack stuff. That's kind of the most of the activity, I think, right now. Travis, if you have anything to add, but that's kind of where his focus is, and yeah, that's it.
I did have.
Nothing. Oh,
Go ahead.
go ahead, Hunter. I was going to say nothing to add, just the Buildpack registry stuff, making good progress with that as well. I could be all updated though.
Yeah, on that part, the Buildpack registry, I want to make sure I'm accurate in saying that the current repo that we just published is like a production ready repo and not meant for testing. Is that accurate?
The one with the PR that you're currently reviewing, you and David?
Yes.
This one you're referring to?
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't point anybody to it yet until we've tested it a few times, just with integrating it into the new repo, because I've been testing it on my own repo prior to this. My thought was, once it's reviewed and as far as we know everything looks good, then let's start, you know, kicking the tires and pointing our config file to use it and see how things go, and just iron out any last minute wrinkles before we do like a PR campaign to introduce it to the broader world.
Cool.
Yeah, I'll continue to collaborate on that and keep you informed of kind of where things are going. And we can, I think Joe had some ideas or thoughts on blog posts or, you know, Twitter, all the social medias to get the word out once we're ready to start having people use it. I know internally here at Heroku, we have, I believe, the Java build pack and the Node build pack authors on our end who we're going to try and have them become early adopters. So we should have some pretty quick feedback on that as well.
Awesome. That's good to hear.
Yeah.
Any other status updates? All right. Moving on to release planning. I think I kind of spoke to this already. The release went out, so we're good there. We don't have anything slated for 6 weeks on pack side. One notable mention maybe is the Windows related work. We're not really promoting that either just quite yet. As Emily made mention, there are still some issues on the lifecycle that need to be addressed before we really want to, you know, I guess put a lot of fanfare behind it. So that's something that for now, it's still experimental. People could play with it. There's a known issue mentioned in the release notes. And then hopefully by the, you know, in the next 6 weeks, we'll have everything else addressed and be able to really put some fanfare behind it.
I think 6 weeks might be an optimistically long period of time. I understand that we're intending to to have at least a little fanfare around Spring 1, although it may not talk to, and you can do this immediately. It will at least be some more eyes on it, which I think is just a couple of weeks out.
Yeah, I was going to say, when is Spring 1 happening?
That is a good question. I get this information secondhand from folks working on the Windows side. So, it is just a couple of weeks out, September 2nd and 3rd.
Okay. Yeah, I know that they have a talk where they're going to tout
Right.
the
Yeah.
Windows support. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. That would be, well, I guess we'll see how that goes. We'll probably require some coordination there.
It's not unheard of for conferences to announce big features that aren't quite ready for prime time. So I have no huge concerns about the expectation management.
Cool. All right. Anything else on release planning? Okay, moving on. So pack release and release candidates, bouncing ideas around. I think one of the big pain points of the lifecycle and the latest release of pack was that essentially we needed a patch of the lifecycle, and we didn't really have any way to test the lifecycle while pack was still being developed. So it's like a chicken and egg problem. So maybe not to solve that directly, but one of the things that we've thought about, and I think this isn't the first time we've brought this up, is the possibility of producing release candidates. Now that we have a lot of automation in place, I think that should be a lot more feasible, where once we go into, at least on pack, we have a feature complete area of a week. At that point, we can have a release candidate. I know some of the other contributors to the lifecycle have been talking about potentially trying to add that there as well, having like a week where they provide an RC that then pack could start integrating with and testing, and that way maybe alleviate some of the unnecessary patches afterwards. So keep an ear for that. If there's no pushback on that, I think pack could start doing that immediately, essentially, on our next release. Cool. All right. Next thing, I feel like I'm hogging the floor over here, but docs. So docs milestones. So in our last sync, we talked about moving from backlog over to using milestones for pack. I think the docs have needed a little bit more, love, I guess. And in providing new pack releases, we also typically want to update the docs associated to it. So one of the things I've started personally doing is creating milestones that are then associated to pack releases. So at least that way we could, aggregate all the changes necessary for any given pack release. And then I've started to use milestones as well for things like KubeCon. So like any feedback that comes out of KubeCon, we could aggregate those issues so that we could put a little bit more focus on those as well. So this is all in lieu of the backlog.
Is that something that could be automated potentially, at least pulling from milestone information and coalescing it into some sort of document?
Yeah, I think David mentioned something similar. Like I think from his perspective, I don't know if this is exactly what you're speaking to, but he wanted still like a single view, right, of all the different ongoing milestones, so that you could go to one area and then just be able to click on all the different sections, I guess, or areas where you want to look at. Is that similar to what you're thinking of?
I have to be honest, a disconnect with how the docs and all that are managed, but I was just wondering in like my head if docs, first off, are they like manually written? Are they auto-generated? And if so, like is there an opportunity maybe to auto-generate new documentation around milestone details, like through GitHub Actions or anything like that?
I see.
Yeah.
We have certain things that are automated. Like recently, we added Go Docs to, or sorry, I shouldn't say that. We're adding Go Docs, but that's slightly different. Um, we've enabled a function of Cobra that generates markdown files for all the pack commands. And so that documentation is auto-generated in that regard and then published onto our website. So there is that at least, right? There are other parts that are a little bit more manual, and these are things like tutorials, right? Having to update tutorials as Buildpack or platform API changes occur. And I don't know that there's a real way to automate that, but I'm sure we could improve it long term. Cool. All right, someone added something. Pack plugin RFC.
Yeah, I felt bad you were talking. They were all your queries, all your points. So the concept of plugins in our binaries has come up a couple of times. Most recently, Joe's RFC around experimental features. I think previously Xander raised a similar RFC about the kind of experimental flag in Pack, which has been implemented, and plugins have been sort of promoted as an alternative, or also just a complementary system. It wouldn't even need to just be around experimental features. It could just be tangential stuff that we actually don't want in the core CMD product, but certain use cases fit it pretty well. And yeah, so I've been doing a bunch of stuff around refactoring our acceptance tests to try and make them a little more inviting to folks. And on the horizon, as I come towards the end of that period, I'm thinking, is this my next big thing? And I guess I'm trying to get a feel for whether somebody else has that feeling, whether somebody else has already kind of started investigating this. If there's room for collaboration, I'd be happy to do that. If not, then I guess the other question is, this is not something that is featured in any of our roadmaps. So it's a little bit kind of out there potentially and not being discussed at a broader level. And the RFC would be an opportunity to do that. But maybe there's a pre-RFC phase of like, do we think this is cool and we're not going to do it? Or do we think actually this is worth pursuing?
Yeah, I'd be curious, has there been any customer community asks around this topic?
As far as I've seen, it has just been the conversations related to our RFCs, so from VMware and from Salesforce.
Yeah.
There is one related thing, because I mean, when we say plugin, right, like the idea sounds great, but this would be typically like an interface to a very specific set of functionality, right? And I think that's the part where I'm missing the use cases for where this plugin, what that interface functionality actually is.
Right.
But if I were to associate it with anything that I've seen before, there is an issue around providing additional backend support, right? So right now we interface with the Docker daemon and with registries, and that's kind of ultimately the only way. But some of the requests that have come in have to do with Podman as one of them, right? And then that would eliminate Docker daemons, and we can't really use their Docker socket support because their Docker socket support is broken, right? So being able to create a plugin in which we actually interface directly with a backend, right? A container backend would be very beneficial. For Mac, I've explored the idea of doing kind of like an alternative to Docker for Mac, where instead we would have our own container D and Linux kit running, and we would start up our own and like manage a lot of it internally so that it would be a lot more like smaller and more performant in certain fashions. And that's where something like, star GZ could come in, where the container, the container snapshotter and all that stuff would run a lot faster. And there's one product, VMware Fusion. I think it's still like alpha or something like that, or beta, but they have VCTL, which allows you to do Docker images and Kubernetes management locally, and they also do not have a Docker socket support, right? So being able to enable that backend would also be beneficial.
So broadly, a kind of a container management infrastructure or repo management infrastructure would be one of the things.
Yeah.
I could see room for there being like additional commands potentially as well. So like I think we don't have an inspect image right now. So if people wanted to do inspections in different ways or something like that, different options potentially, like different blocks of data into our inspections could be entry points as well. I guess in a similar way, like wouldn't it be nice when we were looking, sorry, to exclude a few folks, we had an internal demonstration on a modified version of Dive that allowed us to extract specific CMB image information. And while that isn't necessarily a particularly good use case for it, wouldn't it be nice if Dive had this this plugin interface so we could just publish a plugin and say, we know more about these images, so we're going to offer these options instead of the default stuff that you're going to list. So I can see room for that possibly.
Yeah, I think the way that I would picture this though is maybe creating RFCs not so much for a holistic plugin system, but very small subsections of plugin functionality that we want to provide. And then I think eventually we would maybe circle back around to a central unified system. But I would hate to provide so much of an abstract idea that it doesn't become, something that we could actually implement in a reasonable time frame. So I would be looking forward to an RFC. That RFC does not exist, right?
No. This is this is the pre-RFC chat. Like, do we want it?
Yeah, I think it'd be awesome. But that would be my take on that, is maybe start it small instead of too abstract. Cool. Anything else on that? All right, nothing else on the agenda. I think we're free to go. All right, thank you all.